happy that, they got the guy, Matthew. I didn't know he was the spy. How do you feel about it? Do you think the government should do more? Are you happy with what, the end result?
Yes, I'm happy the American government now is a little bit wake up, but not enough. This movie documentary is very important, powerful for wake up and teach and education American people how's Chinese government infiltration in this free soil. Because in my park, they can burn down the sculpture, this art piece. They can burn down the free speech. So I just heard about talk about Tibet and Hong Kong and the Uyghur. Because so many Chinese spy here. Also, you're very interested in the movie. Have another guy is a volunteer for us. She's movie this don't know this guy is spy in our park, but he's a volunteer.
It's the guy who is installing at night. He's fixing the solar panel or so he's also he turned out to be working for the Chinese government.
Yeah, this is a different line. One line is from Matthew and Liu Fan. They are organized with Chinese government security department. And this guy, Chen Lei, is 线人, what's mean? 线人. Informant. Yeah. And he's working with me and around more than half years. So they know who's helping me, who's important, That's very dangerous for my volunteer. My volunteer, their family in China, they get a warning. They can't help Chen because if you help Chen, your father, mother, maybe the account like bank account, maybe court, Yeah.
Yeah, I think one big, factor of a way of carrying out transnational repression is not necessarily, harassing or intimidating people here. Is to harass and intimidating or even jailing the family members of the dissidents here. This is extremely effective, right? A lot of dissidents I talk to, they feel, I'm going to sacrifice for the cause, right? I am ready, but I cannot sacrifice my family. And, this is the thing that holds them, that they feel they can't fully participate in the movement. It's not about the danger they face. It's about, they can't allow themselves to sacrifice their own family members. So I think, it's very interesting to hear that, one of your volunteer turned out to be an informant and all that. I'm sure that, within the Hong Kong community, Tibetan community as well, you wonder whether this person who came to me is actually, with me for the cause, or he might be, sent by the CCB to be an informant. This is how do you navigate that kind of situation? Does that affect you psychologically? You run an organization, right? There's volunteer, I want an internship. How do you deal with this situation?
We accept a highly overqualified internship. Gotcha.
I will apply. Thank you. Okay.
I think that's actually a question that I've personally grappled with a lot, especially because every time we get to work with young people who are from Tibet, for example, that's a moment that is so special where we get to bring them into the work that we're doing. But it's also a reality that might also leave us vulnerable to individuals who have been interacting with the Chinese government. against their will, but at the same time, there has been more interaction than a Tibetan who might have been born and raised outside. So for me, for a long time, this was something that kind of concerned me, is that how do we create a movement that unites all Tibetan young people, those that were born in Western countries, those that grew up in Asia, and those that grew up inside Tibet maybe. And I think one thing that has really come to the conclusion is that we should just operate as though we should just allow and be welcoming into our space for all those who make themselves present to join our movement. But in order to be able to do that, we have to make sure to maintain the utmost level of both digital and also physical security hygiene. And that means, like, for example, keeping secure topics on a very need-to-know basis and not finding it to be a matter of personal offense. That if me and Yachu are discussing something very pertinent to a research topic, even though we are very good friends with Joey, we may not share. And that's not just because we want to be very exclusive or very, hierarchical or anything like that, but because by limiting the information only to channels where people need to know in order to get a specific task done, we're basically eliminating the factor of who do we trust and who do we not trust, and not bringing that into the discussion about whether someone should be given a relationship with a movement or not. And that way, even somebody who's very well-meaning could also be hacked if they have poor digital hygiene. Or even if they have very good digital hygiene, they may still become the victim of cyber hacking. So in the sense that, as vulnerable as we are to informants, as long as we maintain a strict nature of need-to-know communication, we're able to protect as much as we can and not allow that protection to get in the way of our movement building. Because at the end of the day, we're not just trying to execute one project or one meeting. We're trying to build a movement, and that requires us to accept hundreds of thousands, and eventually millions of people fighting in hand in our nonviolent fight together. So if we're already being overly limiting on who may join and who may not join, that would actually inevitably prevent us from being able to accomplish our utmost goal at the end.
Joey, how about you? I mean, you have 1 million Hong Kong dollar on your head right now. And, do you sometimes feel, I send you a message, is she a spy? Right? Like, how do you navigate this? Like, trying to, keep this work going at the same time, the digital hygiene stuff or trusting people. Like, do I trust or not trust? Just managing the situation, knowing, there's this most powerful authoritarian government is trying to get you.
I think obviously from an organizational operation standpoint, everything that Pema have said, but to be very honest, I don't have a black and white guideline that me myself use or our community use, because everything, all of this transnational repression, the national security law, the extraterritorial effect of Article 23 that was just implemented in Hong Kong less than a year ago, everything is so new to our Hong Kong diaspora community. And with the bounty, with, when you get messages every day, knowing that people are out there to get you, trying to find out where you live, where you go to school, where you go to church, your company information, and send it back to the Hong Kong government, it could be very, very difficult to understand, what are the relationships that I can rely on, that I can trust, who are the people that we can share information with and include them to be a core part of our movement. But I think, obviously beyond what Pema just mentioned about being inclusive while ensuring the security and safety of our community members, me personally, I do think, better be safe than sorry. I understand that, even for me myself as a wanted activist by the Hong Kong government, state-backed cybersecurity attacks don't happen to me on a day-to-day basis. The CCP sending people to follow me, that doesn't happen on a daily basis. But still, you need to understand that, when you talk about safety and security, it's often not just a safety and security of yourself, but that also people who are actively working with you on your team, community members who come to your protests, demonstrations, who join the online group chats that you have created to be part of this movement. So what I personally observe is that, I just have my VPN on all the time. I make sure I don't go to, places where I can't guarantee my personal safety. I make sure that when, say for example, when you take a photo where there could be community members in the background, you make sure to ask for their consent before you post on your, social media platforms. And I think that is not just a practice applicable to our movement, but then also, for a lot of movements happening here locally on the US and elsewhere in other contexts as well.
You're making the film, you're definitely subjecting yourself to more danger. I'm sure that when you're in front of the embassy, there are people who are watching you. So, what do you want this documentary to achieve? Like, what kind of impact do you want to see, and whether you're seeing it?
So this is our first impact campaign. And I really want to thank all the foundations who supported the film and Human Rights Foundation for supporting our impact screenings. So our goal is to hope that this film will raise more awareness and deepen public understanding and also build cross-movement solidarity. So we are planning more similar screenings like this one throughout this year. I really want to work with organizations and bring this film to your community and your institution. I think in terms of the impact, we've been doing festival screenings and we've had many sold out screenings. So I'm very encouraged to see that there's definitely an audience for this film. And also the issues related to this film have been, it's also very relevant with Shu Junwang's case, and also I'm sure you probably all aware of former New York Governor aide Linda Sun's case. So Matthew Zivera's pled guilty, but Frank Liu's case is still on trial. And actually, New York Times recently did an investigation on Zhang Chen. I don't know if you guys remember, he's the one who organized the attack in New York. Yeah. He also organized the attack in San Francisco as well. So Wang Juntao's group was also in San Francisco and they were attacked, and was a much larger scale. And New York Times did a really great piece on him and his connection to the Chinese government, and how he's also influenced state election in New York as well. So I think with these issues are getting more attention in media, this film I feel is really relevant this year, and we really hope to do more impact screenings, and we are also going to have a DC festival premiere later this month.
So, we all want more impact. We want the U.S. government to do more to address the issue. As Joey just mentioned, that the bill, Transnational Policy Act, sponsored by Senator Merkley, was going nowhere, and with all the change, he's in the Democratic Party, and with all the changes in Washington, we all saw in the news, right? It's just overwhelming. What kind of specific things you want the new government to do, and what's your expectation? How do you navigate, the political situation within the United States? Anyone who wants to speak?
I have a laundry list of things that I want to say. I need to time myself. I think I would just, among the 100 things that I wanted them to do, I think there are two most pressing issues. We understand, how the Republican Party, especially the administration, want to completely implement a complete overhaul of the immigration here in the United States, and that includes mass deportation of illegal undocumented immigrants. And as some of you might know, a lot of the oppressed communities, including the Venezuelans, Cubans, Syrians, Ukrainians, and also including Hong Kongers. There are currently over 3,000 Hong Kongers here staying in the US under this temporary policy called the Deferred Departure Policy, which could be revoked by the Homeland Security Department at any time. President Biden, a few days before leaving office, extended that to February 2027. However, we're not sure yet with the cancellation of the temporary protected status for Venezuelans just a few days ago before we speak here at the panel. We don't know if that is going to, if that is signaling a blanket cancellation of both TPS and DED policy for all the protected people from oppressed communities here in the US. If that is the case, if that happens, these 3,000 something Hong Kongers would have nowhere else to go but then to be deported back to Hong Kong, where they could face, lengthy imprisonments for their participation in pro-democracy solidarity protests here in the United States. So I think the most pressing, demand that our community have been advocating for is for a legal status to be granted to not just Hong Kongers, but then everyone who are fleeing authoritarian countries seeking a safe haven here in the United States. When we talk about ourselves, about the United States being a world leader, about being, and champion of human rights and democracy, it can't just be words. It needs to come with concrete actions, and that would include giving, a more permanent residency status to all of these people from these communities. And then the second thing that I want to talk about is also, some of you might have saw from the news, from the long list of executive orders that was being signed by Donald Trump on the first day of his second term. That includes also a freeze on foreign aid. For so many decades, the foreign aid coming from the State Department and other USG agencies have been supporting diaspora organizations from the Hong Kong community, from the East Turkestan Uyghur community, from the Tibetan communities, and so many other organizations fighting for human rights and democracy back home, delivering the much needed support that our people would need to sustain the fight on the ground to counter the Chinese Communist Party's crackdowns on the ground on our democratic freedoms. And it is so important that we urge the Trump administration to end this freeze, or else we would not be able to support our partners who are doing this very, very important work on the ground. A lot of the folks, a lot of the implementers in Washington, D.C. and elsewhere have been, urging for actions, including contacting your own representatives and senators, especially on the Republican end, to urge them to write to Secretary of State, now Marco Rubio, and then the other, relevant government officials to urge them to end this freeze so that we can get this much needed delivery of assistance to the hands of people who are actually now fighting on the grounds, on the front lines of countering this authoritarianism. So I would just lay those, two demands right there.
I echo everything that Joey mentioned, especially about the legal status for those fleeing from authoritarian regimes. So many of our Hong Konger friends, every day, it's a reality that they have to face. The wrong paper being shuffled the wrong way by a politician sitting in a building somewhere else miles away could affect the safety of their just existence on a daily basis. And two other things that I just wanted to add in addition to that is very simply, there have been moments where the government and politicians have created roundtables or briefings or opportunities for activists to share their stories. But at some point, I think when recommendations and activists give recommendations and share from their very painful lived experiences, when action can't be taken, it does start to raise the question of why do you need somebody to continually give recommendations but not to implement many of those crucial ones? And how can activists not be put in a position where they may be felt as rhetoric to build a certain case for a certain agenda, a political agenda? So I think really being able to get those recommendations to the finish line. I understand not everyone may be possible, but I think that there are many, especially when it comes to transnational repression, that activists from fighting against authoritarian regimes around the world have been echoing for several years now. including about different mechanisms that the government can introduce, or even just like a basic legal framework in the United States on transnational repression. And I think the second one, which I wanted to raise, is about the colonial boarding schools inside of Tibet. Because when you have a country like the United States or Canada or Australia that have these histories that are so painful, they truly understand what a genocidal policy like a colonial boarding school can do to fragment a community, to actually wipe a community off the face of this earth indefinitely or completely permanently. Right now, what we're seeing inside Tibet is 80% of all students are being raised by the Chinese government in mandatory boarding school programs. These are children as young as 3 or 4 years old. If you have a child or a niece or a nephew or a cousin who's that age, imagine them waking up in the morning and not remembering what their mother's face looks like. Or waking up one day and realizing their dream was in Chinese last night because they remember Chinese better than their own mother tongue. That's the generation that's being raised by the Chinese government under these policies right now. So although countries like the United States and others have made statements here and there about this issue, I think that really every government, and especially the United States, Canada, and Australia, have the utmost responsibility to do everything in their power to speak out against these colonial boarding schools, whether it's sanctions, whether it's bilateral meetings or public statements at the United Nations. Like, there is no excuse because we already have seen what a fragmenting effect, what a genocidal policy like this can do to an entire nation of people. And so that's something which I think every government, but especially the United States government, has the utmost responsibility to take severe action on immediately.
I have so many things to say about this one. I think another very important thing that I would also love to raise is about, the importance of the United States government standing its ground and taking concrete actions on human rights. For the past few years, the Hong Kong community have been urging the British government, the Canadian government to impose sanctions on Hong Kong and Chinese officials who have violated human rights in Hong Kong. But every time when we talk to these politicians, they say we want to see what the U.S. government is doing. I understand that, some of us may see, the U.S. sometimes its very aggressive role on the international arena as an act of imperialism, but I do think that given the United States economic